Prefatory Note. I shall lay down some terms as if they came out of nowhere. I want to show that this model can look like any other and that it has at least the same powers. After a few pages, I will turn to discuss some of its sources and motivations, and more of them in Chapter 4 AD.
And then my note on this is when he's saying that he's laying down some terms as if they came out of nowhere, he's kind of just letting everyone know, like, I'm not going to cite all the sources that, we're not going to do a whole kind of chapter on like every influence leading up to this moment. Mm-hmm. As to why he does that, there's many possible interpretations, but just for clarity, I think it's, Joey, you read a lot of philosophy. It's pretty common, am I right, that people give a kind of historically situate themselves at the beginning of works?
Yeah, and potentially as they bring in concepts from other thinkers, they might cite that. What I assume being like, I'm going to be using this term in a very specific way, and to have familiarity with that term might be supportive for you. I think that's what the citing or the historical context, the giving a term to a past thinker. When I see Genlin making this remark right here, it says, you don't have to know those things. I'm going to use these terms freshly, and we can follow how they're showing up in this book. And these terms potentially maybe do have histories. And maybe that adds an extra layer for somebody who has read some of that things, but that it's not necessary, that you need go back and understand prior thinkers or history of philosophy.
Absolutely. And you are someone who does have like a pretty solid grounding in prior thinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I am not. And I did find myself able to go into this book pretty deeply. And so I think that's a worthwhile note here of like, I know that Genlin enjoyed people reading this book in the focusing community and like wanted people to engage with philosophy. So, one interpretation, not to claim that it's correct, but there's something I like about, treating this as like, hey, let's just start doing philosophy together and you'll get it. Trust me. We just have to, persist a bit.
Yeah.
So let's do some philosophy together. So chapter 1, who should start?
I'll go ahead and start. Body environment, BN. Body and environment are one, but of course only in certain respects. Let us carefully define them. The body is a non-representational concretion with its environment. But body and environment also differ in some of their characteristics and doings. Let me define 4 kinds of environment. N.
Mm-hmm. Do you need to know what a non-representational concretion with its environment is?
I read him offering us a phrase that we likely don't understand, and we get to go on into that.
Yeah, good. But it does have a nice feeling tone for me. There's something about non-representational concretion that just carries this like energy and like this fuck yeah to it. Like It feels powerful to me, even if I don't quite grasp it.
Yeah, and something for me comes of like, we just read a passage of what is not perception, and here we're kind of having another like non-representation.
I like, there's something about that. Okay, this first paragraph has a lot in it, and so I just want to go on a little bit further with it, and look at that very first part, that body and environment are one, but of course only in certain respects. So I won't comment more on that tension there, but we'll get right back to that soon. And then the other thing I want to focus on as we start going into the next paragraph is let me define it. The paragraph ends with, let me define 4 kinds of environment, parentheses, N. So let's just hold that kind of loosely with us, that we're going to get 4 kinds of what this environment that is one with the body, but of course only in certain respects with the body. And we'll start with the first type of environment, or N, letters E, N, in the next paragraph, which I will start reading through. So, N, number 1, is the spectator's environment. What spectators define in their N, which may affect an organism. For example, it's N number 1 when scientists or hunters define the environment of an animal. They define the N factors. They do it in their own terms. Some monkeys live in trees, others on the ground. The spectator defines these N factors as their, separately from the animal. The spectator may also note something, pollution, for example, that is about to affect the animal while the animal does not yet notice. The spectator's bodies interact with the animal's environment, their own environment attributed to another living body. So if you have the text with you, that probably would have read a little bit clearer, but let me really break that down because, so first off, the spectator's bodies, spectators plural, inclusive, so spectators apostrophe, bodies interact with, quote, the animal's environment. That is to say, their own environment, their own spectator body attributed to another living body. So there's a lot to go into that with that, but maybe I will hold off on going into that and just kind of open that up a little bit more, that there's something key about what this sentence is doing to distinguish what we're saying when we're saying environment number 1. And I think the process that's going to be really helpful while we're in this chapter is to start comparing the environments to each other as we get introduced to these 4 different ones. So some of these kind of confusions I want to leave open. And before you go into reading what environment 2 is defined as, Joey, I'm curious if you have anything to bounce off of what I just said, or if anything else stands to your attention in this paragraph right now.
Yeah. I think this time reading it, what jumped at me was something about spectators defining in their environment, which may infect an organism, and just this repetition of the word defining, define, defines, which I think, again, is just kind of like standing out to me as, situating these words alongside like represent or perceive, and starting to get curious about these different ways I'm relating to something. So the word define jumped out at me, and then at the end of the paragraph, this attributed to another living body. So defining, attributing to, and maybe just leaving those terms open for myself. And I'll go ahead and take N2. So moving into environment 2, N number 2, this is the reflexively identical environment. It is identical with the organism's living process. Body and N are one event, one process. For example, it is air coming into lungs and blood cells. We can view this event as air coming in, or as a coming into lungs and blood and body cells. Either way, it is one event, viewed as N or as body. Here we are not calling it environment because it is all around, but because it participates within the life process. And body is not just the lungs, but the lungs expanding. Air coming in and lungs expanding cannot be separate. The point is that we need not split between the lungs and air.
I'm feeling like reading the next, and then maybe we just see if anything we want to say. So yeah, because the next elaborates it a little, so I think it'll give us good context. So take another example, walking. The same pressure, which is the foot's on the ground, is also the ground's pressure on the foot. We can separate ground from foot, but not ground's resistance from foot's pressure. The N number 2 is not the separable environment, but the environment participating in a living process. The N number 2 is not the ground, but the, and this is hyphenated, ground participating in walking. It's resistance. The behavior cannot be separate from this ground participating. If the body is hanging in air and attempts to walk, its swing will be much wider and it will not move forward. It won't be walking. In deep water, quote, walking will immediately be thrashing. The motions will be different. The body cannot enact the same behavior without the ground. And the ground cannot be ground pressure. It cannot be this N number 2 without the behavior. Without walking, there is still a ground in the sense of environment 1, but not as environment number 2. The environment in the environment number 2 is a function of ongoing living and exists only in that living. So with that, what's fresh here for you? Or what stands out to you?
Yeah, for me, if I jump kind of across those last two, this function of ongoing living exists only in that living. The introductory paragraph on N number 2 about them not only being one event, which I believe we've heard, but something about one process, identical with the organism's living process. And so I really see this like introducing of what is this like not quite simply body, not quite simply in, but this interaction, this process, this living.
This not quite simply body, not quite simply N. Yes. And how does N number one and N number 2 feel different to you so far, like in this text, or I just noticed too, like without walking, there is still the ground in the sense of N number 1, but not as N number 2.
Yeah, something jumping out to me, trying to qualify or moving into N number 2 from N1 is these two sentences in the first paragraph of, we're not calling it environment because it is all around, but because it participates. And regarding body is not just the lungs, but the lungs expanding. There's something about those qualifiers of kind of what N2 is pointing at that's different.
There's some actual aliveness. Like if I point at lungs, that could be like a dead lung like, I forget the term. Like when they take things from cadavers. I don't know what that thing is called. But yeah, you could have the lung removed and be like, that's a lung. And we're saying, and number 2 is definitely not that, from the point of view of the human body in this case, for example. Or actually, this isn't the human body, but this is any body with lungs. But it's the lungs expanding. It's that kind of living movement. It's the air coming into lungs. Yeah. Coming out of the mouth with exhalation. It's the ground participating in walking. There's something kind of always moving in some sense with this. Yeah.
And I'm seeing that like interactive piece of the process that's occurring, having both an N component and a body component, lungs, air, ground, foot.
Yes, right, exactly. And when we are talking about those different components, that's kind of maybe N1 ways of defining things. Because it's from N1 that we're like, that's a ground and that's body, but it's from N2 that we feel ground as what we feel it as, which is ground participating in our walking, the resistance with our foot pressure coming into our foot. Yeah.
The pressure, the resistance.
Yeah. And would you like to continue?
Yeah. The familiar statement, quote, "the environment is a function of the organism," end quote, receives here a more exact understanding. We can clarify what the ethologists mean by saying that there is no single reality, only the reality of each species. It is in the sense of N number 2 that each species has a different environment. Of course, its species members are different, but so is the rest of the N. Environment number 2 and the body are functions of each other. In just this sense, there is no reality, except the various ones that are implicated in the various living processes.
Thus, body is both equal and not equal to N. Rather than staying with such paradoxes, we are building distinctions and concepts. We have been able to specify in some exact respects in which it is and is not equal. So I take this paradoxical statement, thus body is both equal and not equal to N. One way we could maybe see this already is just there's environment number 1 and environment number 2, and we can discriminate and define ground and body and say those are not equal. But then there's this ground participating in walking in which they are equal. There are different species that we can see and delineate, but then there's the species actual N number 2 experience where they kind of are in the process of relating to their environment. And in that sense, there's no reality because every species has a different kind of, organization in what the environment is to them. And that's a whole different way of experiencing reality. And so there's that ways in which it's equal to N. This is my reality. Like I could even say, this is my reality. So like I'm equal to my environment in these ways, like I'm part of it. But then we're saying, but every species has a different environment. So you can put them in the same spot and it's two different realities. And so that's the body not quite equal to N, which somehow is larger and holds all this. So I love when Jenlin says, rather than staying with such paradoxes, and we've read this chapter together a couple times in different ways through, and the last discussion we had was that staying with such paradoxes is like kind of this static, like what if we just said the body is both equal and not equal to N and left it there, that sense of staying with, like not moving further. But if we do move further, we can actually use the tension of like, wait, but is it like wait, how can it be equal if it's not equal? And kind of generate more distinctions and concepts, like a distinction that says, well, it is equal in this way, or it's not equal in this way. So to read that last line again, we have to be able to specify in some exact respects in which it is and is not equal. That's going to let us actually talk about reality.
Yeah, I'm taking those last couple of sentences, like something about like, yeah, what is the intention or the attitude Jen's having towards this project? Like something about that sentence. Rather than staying with such paradoxes, we are building distinctions and concepts, which I think kind of has maybe like a positive orienting out of like maybe shaky ground that gets touched with this reference of different realities and species, but to kind of like move through and past that and to still build distinctions and concepts.
Yeah, I'm curious kind of to have you maybe just drill just slightly deeper into what you said if you'd be interested to. I feel like there's like a little more there that I'd be curious to hear about, like what that means to you. Where does that come from? You noticing those details.
Yeah, I think in the previous paragraph, when we say ethologists, what they might mean when they say there's no single reality, I think there can be a kind of a destabilization in reading something that says that, to kind of sit with this phrase of thus body is both equal and not equal to N, even with this exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. For him to circle back and say, rather than staying with such paradoxes, we are building distinctions and concepts. There's a kind of, we're not just getting excited to be paradoxical and provocative, which I feel like maybe statements such as there is no single reality can be. But to encourage some I want to say like a rigorous consideration for what we're getting at, or kind of what this implies.
I almost want to say, like, of course reality can be different, but that doesn't mean that all reality is always different.
But that doesn't mean that all reality is always different.
That there is no reality whatsoever. To say that there are different realities and no single reality. I mean, that's, yeah. I just want to say that postmodernism. I just want to say postmodernism, and what happens if we're curious about when we say in just this sense there is no reality, and there's something about it that feels like, oh, I can see that, that's true, but then we don't let that constrict us to this maybe way of then kind of saying, and therefore there is no reality writ large, like, but instead kind of delineate more precisely with distinctions and concepts, like, okay, in that felt sense way, there is something about no reality that feels right. And there is something about a shared reality that feels right. Let's really uncover a deeper picture of reality by actually exploring it more intricately and not just collapsing into one or the other. So that to me is part of the power of the paradox, is it lets us acknowledge things that we can feel are true, like that the body and environment are one. And there's a way of like saying, like, duh, air coming into lungs. But then there's a way of saying, but only in certain respects that also feels like, of course, like, I'm here, Joey, you're there. So let's learn from all of that. That's how I take this.
Yeah, I'll take us to the next one. Body and N2 imply each other. We're putting imply here in bold. Body and N number 2 imply each other. It is basic to this philosophy that imply is being defined, but we cannot yet define it from here alone. But we can notice that what are usually called body and N look different, even when we say that they are a part of one event, foot and ground, air and lungs. They are not lookalikes. The mutual implying between body and environment is non-iconic, that is to say, non-representational.
Okay, I gotta pause us there. So we have a little bit more of a sense, even just a little bit, of what that non-representational concretion from the beginning could be pointing at in this elaborating of non-representational. So when I hear that is to say non-representational, I'm kind of hearing this like light defining of non-iconic and non-representational. And then non-iconic is kind of associated with the statement before, they are not lookalikes. Interesting. Something I like about this is that it really is, when Genlin as a philosopher, he can be extremely precise. And I'm not suggesting that this isn't precise, but for me, when I see they are not lookalikes, it kind of shows me something about like how philosophy can work, where he's kind of comfortably making the statement that, well, there's something to say here because they don't look alike. Like even as simple as that, because you could say, well, air and body don't look the same, but like air is not separate from body. It comes.
Yeah, for me, what feels alive is, what does it mean for us to say that something is one event, process?
Right.
When the things don't look alike, they look different.
I love that.
And here in comes implying.
Yeah, and so maybe we can go a little bit more in depth about the implying part after, but maybe it would be great if you just pick right up here. Yeah.
The muscles and bones in the foot and leg do not look like the ground, but they are very much related. One can infer hardness of the ground from the foot, the leg, and their muscles. In an as yet unclear way, one can infer, I'll reread this, in an as yet unclear way, quote, one can infer, end quote, means that the foot implies the ground's hardness. Other kinds of terrain or habitat imply different body parts. Since the body and the N are one event and N number 2, each implies the other. They imply each other and that they are part of one interaction process, one organization. Or we could say each is a part of a larger organization which includes the other. Each functions as it does only in this wider functioning organization. Yeah, I think potentially on into what we were just saying about imply coming in to qualify this relation of body and N here. For me, something definitely shifts in the bringing in of the term organization. Even in just that second to last sentence, each is a part of a larger organization which includes the other. For me, the felt sense of organization as distinct from, say, process, event, interaction, process, it does kind of have this like spatial quality to it. That allows for something to be included within it. That feels significant to me. And something about this use of the phrase, like only in this wider functioning organization.
Right. Which is I think wider for me is part of, wider and organization together give this, are really what bring out that spatial quality for me. And, at the risk of, just saying like, that may sound maybe quite abstract, like we're like getting excited about this spatial quality, but like I feel like part of why we're saying this, part of what is relevancing that to us is when we can feel something, there is a kind of understanding in feeling it. And so when I intuitively feel something about like, oh, I feel like what we're talking, like wider organization, like there is something in that. We know this from focusing. There is something in that.
Yeah. As we're talking about it, I'm watching my mind kind of pull off from the text itself. It's something about, we're talking about body and N and this kind of implication each has towards the other, and something about this, like whether it's a tendency of the mind or a tendency of my mind to want to reach for a spatial way of understanding environment, and potentially like watching that longing as I sit with like the vagueness of N number 2.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if that's appropriate or not in this context, but I'm noticing that appreciation for something about space here. That rings closer to my common sense understanding of environment.
Right, of any way to spatialize it is like comforting almost, or brings that familiarity. Yeah, because so far, and in anticipation of getting to the environment 3, which I think will add, like I'm excited to get there. But yeah, so far there is this kind of figuring out of like, what is the spatialization, if any, of N number 1 or of N number 2? Because our normal sense of environment is being, distorted. And this is by the way, if you're newer to philosophy, which I was when I was reading this book, and I still am quite new to a lot in it, it's a pretty common thing for philosophers to define new words for the sake of helping to disambiguate a concept. So at the very first paragraph, you might have been feeling like, why does Jenlin use N here? And I'm not giving you an answer to that because I think there's a lot going on potentially with that little, with something like that. But I want to say at least one thing about it. The last line of the very first paragraph of this chapter, let me define 4 kinds of environment, and then in parentheses, n. One thing that does, I think, is it says, like, hey, now I'm going to be able to talk about environment with you, but I get to make it everything, like, I get to make it whatever I want. And now you're not going to be as stressed out when I do that, because you still have environment as a word. You can still use it, but that's not necessarily n, and so by giving this term n, Jenlin is kind of rethinking environment, I want to say, like reimagining what it means to say environment. And so kind of we get to hold for ourselves this feeling between what we think environment means and what n is coming into, like is as n is being birthed into meaning, so to speak. And so, Joey, when I hear you talk about like this spatial thing, it's like, but that is normally how we think about environment. For me, if I can feel, there's also this kind of eco way I think about the word environment. Like environment means eco something. It means like, yeah, I love trees. That's also what environment means. Like environment is like good trees and happy water and like fresh air. And environment and city are vaguely different things, even though the city's an environment. It's like, so yeah, just noticing these associations we might bring in with these words, and the freshness of kind of cleaving out this n, and we have n number 1 and n number 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just continuing to sentence, and just wanting to jump back to this sentence of the introduction to n number 2, where he says, "Here we are not calling it environment because it is all around, but because it participates within the life process."
And that's the third paragraph on page 4, halfway in.
So yeah, kind of just with this open question of how should I feel about this like spatialization tendency? What is that wanting?
Because as you're pointing out, there's something about when he's defining n number 2 that, his initial definition is not really about anything to do with space, but is about something about living processes, about aliveness. In fact, on the first paragraph of page 5, with that distinction, it's saying, without walking, there is still a ground in the sense of n number 1, but not as n number 2. And then here we go. The n number 2 is a function of ongoing living and exists only in that living. Yeah. So there's a way where I actually want to say, no, we think of space and living differently, but you're saying, nice, what's in your felt sense here?
Yeah, this is definitely kind of just like freshly sitting with space as a concept. So maybe out there. But for me, something about, I maybe tend to want to, even as I look around this room and register and track it as space, that I have the tendency to want to, I guess, see it as a room full of objects.
Right.
Objects in space.
Right.
And something about the like challenge to, what would it mean for living process to be spatialized? And that feels fresh for me, of like experiencing space as, I'm wanting to just experiment with some of the phrases and words here, but just like implyings of N2, things I could do, things I could experience, or that I am experiencing, and like feeling that interaction kind of happen live and in real time. That feels very different from looking around this room and seeing it as a space full of objects.
Right.
But as almost more so a space full of the word that comes freshly is just like possibilities. In a way in which I can almost like feel those possibilities. Maybe feel in scare quotes.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure where that would fall in here.
Yeah. And I like I like you using, imply here. I'd like to maybe look a little bit, in that exploration you were just doing. I maybe have a little bit to say about the paragraph we just read and what Jen Lin might be getting at on some level with body and number two imply each other. I really like, again, going back to, so this is like the second sentence of that paragraph, but we can notice that what are usually called body and n look different, even when we say that they are part of one event. So I'm skipping the parenthetical. They are not look-alikes. And then I'm going to really highlight mutual implying. So the mutual implying, and for me, I really see like just an arrow pointing out and an arrow pointing in. Like they have arrows pointing all at each other in my, my image. Like the mutual implying between body and environment is non-iconic. That is to say, non-representational. The muscles and bones in the foot and leg do not look like the ground, but they are very much related. This is just a minor point. But to me, like in my head, that's kind of what I see about like picturing the muscles and bones in the foot and the leg, and then seeing these implying arrows pointing out to the ground, and then seeing the ground point back with its own implying arrows, and that there's like this relationship between the two, because as Jen Lin says, one can infer hardness of the ground from the foot, the leg, and their muscles. In an as yet unclear way, quote, one can infer, unquote, means that the foot implies the ground's hardness. Almost to say, as I want to say, it's almost like the foot evolved alongside always a kind of ground to push off of, and could only ever come into existence through this kind of play between resistance of yeah. And
it's interesting to almost like, I'm not just perceiving a ground, I'm perceiving like something to push off of, something to resist.
Yeah. Would you like to read on a bit further, Joey?
Yeah, maybe I'll finish out into. This use of imply also says that the whole event is already there, even if the body aspect or the n number 2 aspect are thought of alone. N number 2 is always in some process and identical with the body in some process.
So I just want to give a small note of Jen Lin says he has this phrase, the whole event is already there. In the previous paragraph, in I think the second sentence, he says, even when we say that they are part of one event, and that was about the looking different, or the kind of that they're not lookalikes, that it's non-representational, it's non-iconic. And then we get to this use of imply also says that the whole event is already there. And then now, instead of saying even if the body and the end two don't look alike, right? If that makes sense. Earlier, there was something about one event and how both sides of it might not look alike. Now we're talking about the whole event is already there, even if the body aspect or the n number 2 aspect are thought of alone. So there's some, I just find really noticing the difference in words there, and how Jen Lin is going to create a trail of those words where he refines them. So now my kind of ears are perked for, the next time Jen Lin's going to mention aspect, to understand a little bit more about what is meant by aspect. But because of what was talked about before, I'm carrying into this, these paragraphs already now, the sense of that when we're talking about one event, we might be talking about things that look very different from each other, but we're still calling it one event. And why am I saying that? Because that's what Jen Lin is saying he meant earlier. And then now that gets elaborated by, and we're also talking about the body aspect and the N2 aspect, which can be thought of alone, but that's something about what imply means is that the body, whatever the body is meant by the body aspect here, somehow implies something about whatever is meant by the N2 aspect here. And so there's a lot of open question about like what any of that means more precisely. But maybe what I'm doing is weaving a little bit of the kind of philosophical thinking where we can see how meaning is created by how words are interrelated. Yeah. And how new words are kind of precisioning or creating new concepts or getting us to look at different aspects of what we're talking about.
Do you want to take us into N3?
Absolutely. So N number 3 is the environment that has been arranged by the body N number 2 process. The body accumulates is a resulting environment. The mollusk's shell, the spider's web, or the beaver's tree when it falls, these are their main environment. But they are the results of the animal's body N number 2 process. N number 3 is wider than N number 2.
Yeah, I'm hanging with results, hanging with wider as curiosities.
Yeah, would you like to bring us further and then we loop back at some point?
So going on, we can set up a continuum of greater and lesser seeming separability. The beaver's tree seems quite separable from the beaver. A bird's nest also. A spider's web is separable from the spider, who will live on and make another if we destroy this web. The mollusk's shell isn't as separable, yet we think it's separate. How about our hair? Is it not a product of the body, but our skin too, and the body too? I'll read one more. The body of any creature is the result of its life process. N number 3 includes the beaver's felled tree, but also the beaver's body. The environment which the process produces is wider, but it includes the body.
I'll even go one further, and then we can... So N number 3 is a different way in which the body and environment are one. Parentheses, the body is environment, end parentheses. But since this environment is wider than the body, this equation isn't perfect. How body and N number 3 imply is more complicated. Felt sense opening here. Taking this in like I'm feeling, yeah. Again, so when Jenlyn says this much, when we've said this month, without trying to like be too precise, like what are some characteristics of N3 that you can feel now? Like what's jumping out to you? Where's N3 versus N2? What's happening?
I'm really sitting with like results. It's the results of N2 body process. And something about it being wider, but I'm connecting that to like, is it necessarily an active process?
Great question.
Right, like if the spider leaves its web and comes back, potentially, how is that potential N number 3 spider's web relating to N number 2 or life process at that point? Is it?
Yeah.
I'm noticing that kind of come up in me as a question.
Yeah. Yeah, how is that related to the life process? So if we wanted to do a very loose reading, so I could say more, but I've also read this like 8 times now. And I don't feel the need to say more. And I do want to illustrate that, the kind of learning principle of, if I can grasp even a little bit that gives me some taste of what this might mean, even if it's wrong, actually, even if it's actually a bit imprecise or I'm a bit off, that gives me enough to feel like I can move forward. Like the thing that's a little bit harder and it's okay when it happens. It's like when there's just nothing, like I take nothing, I'm like, I have no idea what this means. But somehow, at the very base, you use the word result. Like you used a couple words that say something about what N3 is. Even if we were to leave it really, really ungraspable right now, and we barely know anything about what N3 is, like something about it is like the result of living process, whatever that means. But there is a feeling about that. Like we know what the difference between like a result and the thing that's producing it is intuitively. So there is a little bit of a distinction there. And then that actually opened you, Joey, into this kind of question of like, well, then, like, how does this relate to like living? And I want to almost kind of say like, well, there's a producer and a result. What's the living part of that? So there's something about N number 3 being wider. There's something about it being the result of N number 2. And in the next paragraph, in the second paragraph you read, which is the bottom of page 5, Jen Lin writes, we can set up a continuum of greater and lesser seeming separability. So we're talking about results of living process. And, so Jen Lin's like, so the beaver's tree seems quite separable from the beaver. Okay, sure. A bird's nest also. Yeah. Like the bird flies away. Now we have that spatial sense of spatial sense of environment. A spider's web is separable from the spider who will live on and make another if we destroy the web. And then the mollusk's shell isn't as separable, yet we think it's separate. So how about our hair? Is it not a product of the body? Yeah, duh, of course it's a product of the body. Oh, but our skin too. Okay, well, yeah. And the body too? Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I guess, didn't we start from cells that reproduce themselves and kind of like, yeah. So, okay, now I'm uncomfortable. Now,
yeah.
How far do we go?
The question feels like it's deepening about like how separable is N number 3 from life process?
Yeah, beautifully said.
To consider to what extent my hair or my skin or even my body, are they always in relation to life process or not?
Are they always in relation to life process?
And then for me, it does seem significant that he started that paragraph with seeming separability, almost as if to challenge that they're really so separate.
Yeah. We've been taking our time a bit more because for some of you, this might be the very first time you're encountering the text, or one of the, or it's still very unfamiliar to you. I generally think that reading a good chunk of stuff and then going back gives us more to talk about. But I think, when it feels like we're hitting a lot of unfamiliarity, I do like to go a little slower and like spend a little bit more time. Even if in the discussion we had, maybe there's still so much unclear, but we have a little bit of something to carry with us, a little bit of something as we now elaborate our understanding further. So Joey, if maybe you can read like this up through kind of the next 3 or 4 short paragraphs. They're all quite small.
Yeah. So moving on from the body and N number 3 imply, how body and N number 3 imply is more complicated. The bloodstream is often called the environment of the cells it feeds. The many processes in the body have various parts of it for their environment. The skin line is not the great divide. N number 3 stretches from the beaver's tree into its body to the cells. N number 3 is the environment that has already been regenerated by body process. It is the web and also the spider's body and its parts and subparts. The life process goes on N number 3. It goes on in the spider's web as well as in its body. The body is an environment in which body process goes on further. The body was made from an embryo engaged in process. The body structure is not only made but also maintained by ongoing processes. If they stop, the body disintegrates. See the lines on a seashell. A small first part is already a seashell, and was the smaller animal's shell. Rings and rings more are added on by growth. The shell has the nature of an action track. It is process concretized. The body is also like that, a record, an action track. When aspects of N number 3 get re-involved in life process, they are thereby also N number 2, both within and outside the skin envelope body.
So from your felt sense, I'd love to ask, what's N number 3 mean to you right now? Like, just even however vague, like, what do you feel? And citing direct quotes or just, just from the felt sense.
Yeah, for me, it's maybe these layers of life process that get kind of like generated and like put out, and I might then go in to move further into them. Maybe life process does move away from them. Something about these kind of confirmative phrases of like aspects of N number 3 get re-involved in life process, so they can become detached from life process.
Right. And also notice that second aspect of the sentence. They are thereby also N number 2, both within and outside the skin and envelope body. And so this clarification that we're not talking about everyday environment here, people. We're not talking about the floor of my house as, environment. We're talking about the floor of my house as N. If we look at that N as N number 2, and I say I am N number 2, I'm my living process. I live in myself, like I'm a human. I'm me. I'm alive. The resistance of the floor of my house into my foot is me, if I'm defining me to be N number 2. When Jenlin says both within and outside the skin envelope body, the reason I'm bringing up old environment and the new environment N that we're defining here is N number 2 really does mean the ground as it enters into pressure relation, like that living process of thing. It doesn't mean the part of the ground, see, I'm saying part of the ground, and there's a way we, like N number 1 observer, you can call them separate, but there's a way that they're in interaction. And when they're in interaction, in a live interaction, that's N number 2. The skin envelope, importantly, I'm gonna claim already Jenlin is actually clarifying, is not actually the boundary for some of these environments. And it you might intuitively be bringing that in, but maybe this could be one of those early challenges to that seemingly common sense notion of like, when I push into this table that's in front of us, Joey, in an N number 2 sense, that's not separate. That's not separate from living process. And in that N number 2 sense, it's not really table out there, because it's right here interacting with me alive now, and my body is changing through it, with it, alongside it. But that's going a bit further in N number 2, which I felt that paragraph made more alive for me. If I was to say, like where I'm at with N number 3, it kind of keeping myself to this part of the text, I'm really struck by that the kind of middle paragraph of the chunk we read, like the life process goes on in, and that's in bold italics, N number 3. It goes on in the spider's web as well as its body. So I love this feeling of this like little relationship where life process, he's not necessarily saying N number 2 here, but N number 2 is a function of ongoing living. So they really come together. But if we just keep it to life process, it's like, yeah, living goes on in N number 3. And earlier he said that at the very beginning of the definition on page 5, N number 3 is the environment that has been arranged by the body N number 2 process. So there's this sense in which this wider N number 3, that the N number 2 body like is living, generates N number 3 and goes on in it. And there's something about like the spider's web that feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's these other distinctions that maybe feel like confusing because, well, like the beaver doesn't generate its tree. So okay, open question there. What does it mean to say it's arranged by body end number 2 in some of these cases? But with a spider's web, there's like a clear case of like the spider's living, it's moving, it's generating this weave from its abdomen, and it's weaving itself a kind of home, a kind of way of getting its food. All this life goes on it, and it literally goes on, within its own web that it produces. It's such a beautiful example that lets us, maybe see in our more intuitive way of a spatialized environment that the spider kind of like literally exists on this web that is outside of it now. It's outside of it. It's like from an n number 1 point of view, they are totally separate. And from a living process point of view, the spider's web might get destroyed. It might make a new web, so it can be separate. But when it's on the web, it's literally on the thing that it made. And so there's something about n number 3 and that there's something about arranged by the living organism, something about that with what n number 3 means. And that the living organism goes on in what it arranged. I'm going on in my house. I didn't build my house, but I did move my furniture around my house. I do have a kind of setup, and my living goes on in this thing that I'm constantly arranging for myself, from myself.
I'll pass it to you.
Okay. So the process is body n number 2 and goes on in body n number 3. So I'm going to stop there for a second. I was saying earlier with that paragraph, the life process goes on in n number 3. We have a now nice kind of definition. The process is body n number 2. Okay, so just weaving that together. So the process is body n number 2 and goes on in body n number 3. But only some results of life become n number 3. Only those in which it goes on. Now, when I read that, there's a little bit of like a, I'm not sure what would be that yet. Continuing. N number 1 is what the spectator observes all around the body. So that to me is helpful. What the spectator observes all around the body. That feels, really common sense to me. Like I see a table in front of me, I see Joey in front of me. So I'm observing that around my body. And then continuing the sentence, but the body also has its own environment, which it has made. Okay. Next paragraph. But if n number 3 affects the body, only if it is again n number 2, is the distinction only for a spectator. I have the sense that sentence may have lost some people. I'll read it again and then see if I have anything to say about that. But if n number 3 affects the body only if it is again n number 2, is the distinction only for a spectator? So if something is affecting me, it's in my n number 2. Kind of like when I was saying like my hand pushing on the table. Like if it's in life process, it's n number 2. And part of what I feel in here is like, okay, so we're saying n number 3 is wider. We're saying n number 3 is wider than the body. We have some examples of the n number 2 body, like the spider, separating from its web. So we know that n number 3 can become separate from the n number 2 body. But then Jenlin is saying, n number 1 is what the spectator observes all around the body. The spider has its web, doesn't have its web, makes a new web. From the spider's point of view, is n number 3 only relevant like when it's actually interacting with it? Is the spectator the only person who's going to point and say like, oh, look, that's a web without a spider, or like and it looks like the spider built a new web over there. Is it only relevant for the n number 2 body when it's in n number 2? If so, what's the distinction? What's the point of all this wider process if the only time the n number 2 body, the life process itself, recognizes it is when it's already in an interaction with it, when it's already there. And in that sense, when it's already n number 2, is there even a distinction? I'm not going to answer this question, but I hope that maybe gives more of a felt sense of what this question might be getting at. Like, what's the point? Is n number 3 only for the spectator? So I will read on. Of course, it is one body, not two. N number 3 can affect the body only insofar as it re-enters n number 2. But then it matters very much that this n number 2 is not all new. It is also already a product of this life process. The process goes on in its own products. Let's pause there. Any confusions with that, Joey? And the reason I ask is because every time I read it, I always get stumbled on this part. And so I feel like I'm doing people a service by slowing down on this one.
Yeah, of course, it's one body, not two. And number 3 can affect the body only insofar as it re-enters n number 2. I feel like we were saying that. Then it matters very much that this n number 2 is not all new. It is also already a product of this life process. Then it matters very much that this n number 2 is not all new. Already a product of this life process.
And so what I'm going to suggest is kind of hold that because I have it too. And let's keep reading with that So the process goes on in its own products. Say a different tree is about to crash and hit the beaver. The observer may see that it is about to happen. So n number 1, as an observer, I may see that this tree is about to hit the beaver. I can hear the crack, I can see the falling. But n number 3 does not re-enter the process in that arbitrary way. The very tree the beaver gnaws will not hit it. It will affect the beaver in many ways once it is on the ground, but these will be importantly different from the intrusion of a tree that was not already en number 3. Now, immediately I get this feeling of a distinction when he says that was not already en number 3. That to me means that there are things that are now en number 3 and things that are not en number 3. So I get this feeling of like n3 can have this history to it. Like the tree could have been in the beaver's n3, but this tree that we're talking about, that is the intrusive tree that the spectator observes, was not already n3. So there's some distinction. I'll continue the paragraph. The body implies the environment that the body already, quote, is. Life happens largely with environments that life has produced or modified. The process goes on largely in its own products. Now I'm going to send it right back to you, Joey. If you got something, I'd love to hear it. If you don't, I'll explore and then we'll just keep reading. But I'm in conversation with this what is he saying? Yeah. This tightness in my solar plexus. This like what?
Yeah, I definitely have that in this paragraph. I'm seeing a distinction made about things life process has modified or produced versus that which could have been or even could potentially still be modified, rearranged, made into N3s. So something about this like arbitrary intrusion of something that's not yet my N3, but could become my N3.
Because the N3 was arranged by the N2 body, right?
Yes.
Which means the beaver didn't arrange it, whatever that new sense of arrange means, or then it's not in its N3, so to speak.
Yes. And so something about like N3 does not re-enter the process in that arbitrary way. An arbitrary intrusion is not N3.
And there's a sentence that feels like a, for me, it's like a bam sentence right after that, which is, Jenlin says, the very tree the beaver gnaws will not hit it. And I just want to say, well, because, you know, the beaver's in this intelligent species that it is adapted to live around trees. It knows how to, it builds these unbelievable structures with trees. It lives its whole life in relationship to this thing. And into that felt sense that I just, you know, built up for myself, the very tree the beaver gnaws will not hit it.
Mm-hmm.
The tree that's in participation with the you know, the beaver's willfulness, the beaver's life process, the beaver's arranging of its environment, that tree's not going to hit it. How could it hit it? In some sense, almost like a logically irreducible fact. Like, how can a tree the beaver gnaws hit it? That's not what the beaver's designed to do. That's not what its intelligence is used for. It won't do that. But yeah, there could be a tree that falls that hits the beaver. It's not going to be that tree that the beaver's gnawing, but there could be one. And that tree which falls and hits the beaver, that's not N3, because N3 doesn't enter into life process in that kind of what Jenlin's calling arbitrary way. Interesting there. Interesting. Arbitrary. It almost makes me say arbitrary to whom? Like, for the spectator, I don't necessarily think that that's an arbitrary distinction. It's like, oh, well, there could have been a cause for the tree falling, even that we could have predicted or detected. And, or maybe there was like a sound wave that somehow the beaver didn't hear and it cut the tree, you know, like whatever weird explanation. But for the beaver, this is how I feel. For the beaver, that could be arbitrary. Like, it doesn't know about this happening until it happens. And in that sense, it's like, whoa, it's the shock. It's this arbitrary experience. Whereas the tree falling when the beaver gnaws on it, that's not arbitrary. That's sensed by the organism. The organism in a way knows what will happen there. Okay, that's me really feeling into this, and I'm yeah.
This is helpful for me to feel into. The last two sentences: life happens largely with environments that life has produced or modified. The process goes on largely in its own products. So I feel like I'm sensing something about this relationship of n number 2 and n number 3, like, comes from n number 2's history. And the intrusion of like a new object, even if it could potentially be part of an organism's or a life processes, n number 3, but if it wasn't prior, that is not n3. That's an arbitrary intrusion of something different.
Which is such a different sense of, again, the beaver's environment, where it's like, yeah, the beaver lives in an environment with all these trees around it.
Potentially, yes, but its n3 is not.
But it's exact right.
Its n3 is specifically the products, arrangements, modifications its life process has generated.
Arranged, sometimes goes on in. And yeah, there is a sense of, like, I want to say, like, but doesn't the beaver go on in an environment where it can detect different trees, and, like, won't it have once detected a tree that may fall on some point? And so I'm going to let that be kind of like, oh, I don't quite know. I'm going to let,
But it does make me think, like, tangential example, somebody who's gone and walked around a path, their local walking trail, 100 times, and then they go out there one day in just a different attitude or mindset, and they find themselves interacting with new things. Like, something in me wants to say that those new things that then become a part of their interactive experience, like, were not part of their N3 in the past, and they're now coming into interaction with new things that, from an N1 standpoint, potentially have always been there.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But are now kind of being brought into N2s.
And then you remember what's there, and I almost want to say, is that a kind of N3? Like, to then know, oh, now next time I go on a hike, I could.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm watching my mind kind of make some more connections that I think are a little bit more speculative. But...
Well, I'm curious to hear your speculative thing because we can be wrong.
mm-hmm. Yeah, this is maybe more so about something about how an N, I'm going to play around with,
Yeah.
an N1 tree is arbitrarily intruding on Beaver N2's N3 environment. N2 life process brings into N3 those things which it engages with. There's no way in which that could be arbitrary. N2 isn't intruding on N1 objects and making them N3? Question mark.
There's no way it could be arbitrary in the sense that I feel like a living process, a living body does things that that makes sense for that body.
Yeah.
That makes sense for that
Nice.
body. Right.
I think I caught myself like in this walking on a path experiment to say like, is N2's life process at all engaging with things that don't then contribute to N3? And I found myself wanting to say no.
And say that sentence one more time for me. Yeah.
I think in the thought experiment of imagining the person going on a walk and maybe recognizing new things for the first time, these now potentially become N3 environment for them to go on in. And I guess I caught myself wondering like how significant does that need to be for life process for it to be considered N3? And
or even does it need to be? I see. How significant does it need to be? Interesting.
Yeah, and I think I caught myself saying, if there's experience occurring, if there's interaction occurring, it's N3. It's now N3 that I can go on in.
Right, but I hear in you this kind of question is like, is N number 3 like relevant, so to speak, for the organism? Like, obviously a spider's and web N3 is really, really fucking relevant for the N2 body of the spider that like is living ongoingly. But so there's this open question of like, is there some relevant, like this criteria of relevance for
Absolutely.
N3? Or is it really any? Yeah.
That's what I caught myself saying.
Any interaction with the N2 body that makes something N3, any whatsoever? Does I don't want to weave into the territory of this feeling like useless. And also, am I pausing you from? Okay.
No, yeah, I'm listening.
A territory that feels useless. Because for me, I really want this book, this book has lived and breathed in me, through me, with me, as something really, really relevant to my life that's helped me a lot. But to still ask maybe this kind of speculative question of like, if I go on a walk outside and go like push on some stone that I haven't pushed on, is that in my N3? And just something about like, if I push on this table in front of me, is this my is this now like everything I touch is like now my N3. This is now my N3. Like I touch it, it's my N3. But of course, I don't just. There's nothing in my house that I've touched for the first time. It was arranged by me. So there's also this like obviousness of like, well, this is my table. It's already in my N3. I chose it. I wanted to ask that just for the sense of speculation of like, is wherever an animal ever walks, it's N3. And if so, is that useful? Is it not? Let's continue to elaborate our understanding of these distinctions that Gentlin is making. Because, here's the thing. We have one more page for this chapter. This chapter is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4.5 pages long. It ain't long. And And yet these four different versions of N might give us a lot of ways of looking at life as we continue reading this book. So right now, there are some questions I could ask about N2 and N3, because this line of questioning is feeling a little vague to me, of like, almost a sense of like, what does it matter for this N3? What does it matter for N3 if like an animal once walked in one spot or something? I'm going to let that be open. And let's ask again another time with more context. And before we move on, is there anything fresh in you right now, Joey?
No.
Okay. Well, is it your read now?
Think so.
Yeah, and I think we're at the main, quote, environment, unquote.
Nice.
So this is the second paragraph on page 7.
So the main environment of any animal is its species members, other animals like it. These are products of the N-2 process of the species. In that sense, they are quite obviously N-3, and, when something is ongoing, N-2. By far the greater proportion of animal activity is with and towards them. The mother for the infant, female and male for each other, the group for the individual. These are crucial environments. We must not take the physical environment as our basic model of environment, although that too will often already be N3, already organized by the life process when the current life process draws it in as N-2. I love that.
What do you love about it? What are some things you can say about that?
I love how kind of out of the blue it came, and how much of a flip, how easy it felt to kind of take it into what he's already set us up with, and how much of a flip it was from all this kind of like thinking about the objects I'm perceiving in space to all of a sudden like, oh, the most significant environment just became nothing to do with those things. Very little to do with those things.
It became other living people, other living animals, other living creatures.
Yeah. And then I also, resonate quite a bit with like what strikes me as like most charged with life in any given space is you sitting across this table from you.
right. We orient most to the other humans in our environment. Absolutely. And he scare quotes environment at the beginning of this, which is fantastic because yet again there are these couplings of what environment means to us, and then this splash in the face of like, oh, but why do we think of in like for me, why does environment mean, again, eco, river, beaver, tree, leaf, bee, flower, not all the humans I'm constantly around all the time that are like everything in some senses. And so by playing with these words, we're kind of rethinking like, what is it that we're habituated with, and what is it that our living goes on through. And yes, we get to keep the beautiful sense of there's something about having an ecological environment. Like that's meaningful for me, that I have the felt sense of environment meaning something about that. And also there's like this environment of me amongst my members of my species, me amongst other animals, that the main environment of any animal is its species members, other animals like it. I'm going to actually read through that just to see, I think reading twice hardly hurts, and it'll see if there's anything else that jumps for me. So these are products of the N-2 process of the species. What? Its species members, other animals like it. These are products of the N-2 process of the species. Oh, as in like birthing, as in reproduction, as in even asexual reproduction, as in even cell division, as in these animals are products of the living N2 process. Well, that before reading the next sentence, I already am like, well, isn't that how Jenlin defined N number 3? And yes, dear listener, this is how philosophical definitions want to work, because he goes on to say, in that sense, they are quite obviously N number 3 because they are products of N number 2, which is how Jenlin defined N number 3. And when something is ongoing, N number 2, which again brings forth that, I'll read just a scatter of sentences on page 6. The life process goes on in N number 3. It goes on in the spider's web as well as in its body. Further down, when aspects of N number 3 get re-involved in life process, they are thereby also N number 2, both within and outside the skin envelope body. The process is body N number 2 and goes on in body N number 3. And then back to this sentence, I'll read it again. The other members of the species are products of the N number 2 process of the species. In that sense, they are quite obviously N number 3. And when something is ongoing, N number 2. When there's interaction, when it's touching life process, it's in N number 2. By far the greater proportion of animal activity is with and towards them, the mother for the infant, female and male for each other, the group for the individual. These are crucial environments. We must not take the physical environment as our basic model of environment, although that too will often already be N number 3, already organized by the life process when the current life process draws it in as N number 2. Oh, I love that. Draws it in as N number 2. So there's a funny thing Jenlin says. This is a seeming non sequitur, but I'm going to tie it right back in. Where, one of the funny things about philosophy is it's hard. You got to read it at least twice to call yourself as having read it once. And then at some point, after dilly-dallying about what does this mean, what does that mean, you read the text later on and you're like, oh, it means what he says. It means the thing that the philosopher wrote is what it means. There's this funny thing that by, Joey, you read it once. It was like, okay, it meant something to me. Then I gave some thoughts about it. I felt a bit more. I read a little bit, it had more thoughts, felt it a bit more. I'm building a felt sense of it as I'm doing that. I'm kind of getting something alive about it. I'm taking these dead words, which have no living in them, until it interacts with an N2 environment like me, like you, and I'm getting these pictures of the words, these feelings of the words, these meanings of the words, and feeling it further. And finally, as I read this paragraph myself the second time, I'm like, oh, it means what it says it means. It couldn't have meant that. It didn't mean that when you read it, but it meant that for me when I read it, as I had this feeling okay.
Nice. I love that. And that rings true, because there's many of these paragraphs that either you or myself has read, but I need to read them again. And yeah, something about this image is coming to my mind. The difference between I'm walking versus I am attending to that experience of the ground's pressure on my foot. And to feel like, I don't know, if life process is like concentrated in that single little piece of it. But something about like rereading the paragraphs to try and
feel the pressure of the ground.
Yeah.
Feel be in contact again. Yeah. And that might be a fun experiment we do, actually, where, because I've read this so much that I can often have thoughts at the top when I read something, even when I'm confused. I'm curious if you want to just try out, and we can just switch back, that we actually kind of do a 2-pass read where I kind of do the first run and then you go through it a second time and feel into it. How would that sound to you?
I like that.
You like that? Any resistance to that?
I don't think so. And what I'm hearing, to clarify, is just playing around with double reading paragraphs as we go on.
Yeah. Kind of just this sense of like, it's not going to be time wasted. It's that there's almost this like perniciousness to like reading where it's like, okay, we read the thing and then now we talk about it and we pick quotes from it. And I'm just like, let's just read it twice. Like this is what we're learning from. This is the thing. Funny. And we're feeling it differently as we read a bit, reflect a bit, and then go back to reading further. So let's just try that on. So I'm gonna
it gives me the checking back kind of tone to it.
The checking back.
We come back to maybe you check in with how your body's doing.
Oh.
As in, let's reread the paragraph and see what feels fresh, new.
Absolutely.
If we're still even in contact with it.
Yes. So, N number 3, this is the, just for clarity, page 7, paragraph 3. N number 3 is the cement you walk on, the mole's hole, the beehive, the anthill, and our bodies and theirs. The life process N number 2 makes itself an environment in which it then goes on further. We can call it the homemade environment or the domesticated environment. N number 3. A lot of juice there. For people just listening without a book in front of you, that second sentence is in all bold, all italics. The life process, parentheses, N number 2, makes itself an environment in which it then goes on further. So definition-wise, I want to say I've had intimations of this. I've felt this. Life process and N number 2 have been weaving together in this text quite a lot. Now we're just getting very bluntly life process and in parentheses N number 2. There's a kind of just straight definition now of like when we're talking about life process, we're talking about N number 2. I'm going to be open to being wrong, but be so bold as to make the claim that there's a kind of strong definition here. Any other things that come up for me? Well, I'm curious do we want to go one further or do you want to loop this one?
I'll go another further. The use of the word in quotation marks, the use of the word in is as yet unclear. When I say that the process goes on in N number 3, because we do not wish to begin with any clear notion of space. We have and use our space, of course, but let us permit new concepts of space to arise from our interactional concepts. We will derive the distinction between external and internal in 7b. Many quite different kinds of space can be generated from the process, both conceptually and experientially, as we will see. So let us allow this two-directional in to stand. That's validating to my already watching my mind struggle back and forth. It's like, is it valid to want to spatialize this? And like, what does that do for me? Why is that tendency there?
And Jenlin wants something about permitting a new concept of space to arise from interactional concepts. So here's, by the way, new definition here. It's this notion of an interactional concept. And it's what we've been doing this whole time. These are interactional concepts. There's a kind of spectators type of interaction with environment. There's a kind of living process interaction with environment. And then there's a kind of like sense of habitat and environment that interact with each other. There's this interaction between the living process and its environment. It's funny to then read interactional concepts of this sense of like, we're learning something maybe a bit more about how things interact than about what something is. Like instead of like this, that, the other, it's almost like, well, what is the this, that, and the other? How are they interacting? And then we're using N number 1, M number 2, and N number 3 to look at a lot of different kinds of interaction.
Yeah. And to later bring in space amidst that.
You're right. And to bring in space amidst that.
Something about in.
And I'm curious to have you reread the paragraph above and see if there's any freshness for you.
that N number 3 is the cement you walk on, the mole's hill, the beehive, the ant hill, and our bodies and theirs. The life process N number 2 makes itself an environment in which it then goes on further. We can call it the homemade environment or the domesticated environment, N number 3. No fresh hits. I do like this calling, homemade, domesticated environment.
Right, because if N number 3 is the product of living process, there's a kind of inherent, domestication of it. It's like, I make it for myself.
Yeah.
More reading?
More reading.
So let us allow, I'm picking up off the last paragraph, the last sentence. So let us allow this two-directional in to stand. What, quote, inside and, quote, in mean is no simple question. The simple, quote, in of a skin envelope assumes a merely positional space in which a line or plane divides into an outside and an in. But the ground pressure is exerted not just on the sole of the foot, but all the way up into the leg and the body. From most any single bone of some animal paleontologists can derive not just the rest of the body, but also the kind of environment and terrain in which the animal lives. This is some kind of imply, right? In breathing, oxygen enters the hyphenated bloodstream environment and goes all the way into cells. The body is in the environment, but the environment is also in the body and is the body. We can say that the N number 3 participates in N number 2, or we could say that the body N number 2 process goes on in the N number 3. So N number 3 is in N number 2 in how it participates in N number 2. And body N number 2, this living process, is in number 3 in that it goes on in N number 3, this process that is wider than it. It's an interactional type of wider.
That's a really helpful distinction, because I feel like I maybe have just conflated those and used them interchangeably. But that I like that that's being made really clear for me here. Participates in versus goes on in. So something participating in the life process versus life process going on in
Right.
a participating environment.
A participating and beautiful. See, I love that weave right there. It makes both sides of it alive.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that blurry distinction of aliveness. Now, other quick things come to me about EN number 2. It's the and then notice that Genlin is doing this thing of hyphenating body N number 2, like he's conjoining these together. So there's this body N number 2 process that is this living process. It goes on in N number 3, and also living process just goes on. It goes further. Living process is this going on, and then there's this participating environment, N number 3, that participates in N number 2, which goes on it. Am I saying much different? I'm feeling it. That's why I'm re-saying it.
Nice.
Like I'm just feeling that kind of interacting flow between those. Okay, and then this all brings us to the last definition for N from the original 4 kinds of environment that Genlin set out for us with this chapter. So this isn't N number 4. This is, take us out, Joey.
N number 0, our 4th type. Something may someday affect the life process in B N number 2, but is not now. This has never happened, and is not now any creature's N, not even the spectator's. In the seemingly infinite richness of the unborn, something may happen which has not yet, and will then be defined in terms of the process in which it participates. Let us allow ourselves to talk of this now. We don't want to say it plain isn't. Since this has no reality as n number 2, and since n number 3 is the result of the n number 2, we need a term for environment that has never been functioning in a life process. I could read on a bit more. N number 0 is not what does function, but has not been recognized. It is not what does function, but has not been recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Vast reaches of the universe are involved in our process. These are all already part of n number 2. N number 0 is that with which some n number 2 might come to be, but has not. Parentheses, we need not assume that what is must become n. Close parentheses. If something new enters n number 2, it is determined as much by life process as by n number 0.
Okay. So, there's something. So this is an interesting, very interesting environment, and it's perhaps him using 0 that gives us more clarity, like that further reinforces. Yeah, we're starting to talk about a little bit of a different territory now. We're starting to get into something else, and in the first paragraph we just read, this is the bottom of page 7. In the seemingly infinite richness of the unborn. Quite poetic there. Something may happen which has not yet, and will then be definable in terms of the process in which it participates. But until it's definable, there's this seemingly infinite richness of the unborn, and n number 0 has something to do with that. Let us allow ourselves to talk of this now. We don't want to say it plain isn't. We don't want to say that there isn't this kind of unborn realm, so to speak. Like, not maybe in this metaphysical sense of like, oh, we can like grab, but like this potentiality, this possibility of coming into existence. We don't want to plain say it isn't.
Though it is not definable, or not yet defined, though it's not the spectators.
Yeah, though it's not the spectators' environment. And in fact, so undefinable is that it's never happened. It's not now any creature's end, not even the spectators. But someday, something may someday affect the life process. And if it does, be N2. So again, we have some clarity on, again, how N2 works. If it affects the life process, it's N2. So if the tree hit the beaver, it's N2. Tree hitting the beaver hyphenated. So yeah, so that's me kind of going in that a bit, kind of running through here. We need a term for environment that has never been functioning in life process. And then we get this really weird, potentially, distinction that vast reach, in the next paragraph, on page 8, vast reaches of the universe are involved in our process. These are all already part of n number 2. What? Good luck conceptualizing that. I was with n number 2 as the table, and it's actually the fucking cosmos.
Yeah, which feels very significant to me, that it is not what does function, but has not been recognized. So it's not just the unrecognized.
Ah, beautiful. It's not just the unrecognized.
But it is the not yet functioning, not yet participating.
Not yet participating in any living process, in any spectator's environment. So this is actually really interesting. This is to say, if I come in with a concept, that's already in living process. It's no longer unborn. So you could say, oh, there's this potential thing that doesn't exist yet, but that concept of it does. So that's not yet unborn. So just in the end, when something comes into the environment, the spectator's environment, that's still not N0, right? N0 is the unborn. It's not.
Yeah, my impression is like, if the spectator's defining it, it's at the least functioning for the spectators.
Right. So then what does that mean about our concept N0 in its own terms?
You have something.
Well, just the sense of the N0 is as a concept that we're now using, not n0, because it's not unborn.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like we're playing maybe with this n number 1, n number 2 kind of back and forth of like reflecting on this concept. But our reflecting on it isn't unborn in the way that it is.
N0 just got N2'd, right?
N0 just got N2'd. Say more.
We are life process. We are participating in
participating in
the concept, or going on into the concept of N0.
Yes.
Meaning that it's as a concept, not N0, N number 0.
Right.
For
It's
us.
right. It's not functioning as N number 0.
Because it is functioning.
Because it is functioning. Exactly. Well said. Okay. So N0 is this weird thing. Like we're defining something, but the something that we're defining exists outside of what we're defining. It's this weird like
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So I'll go I'll go reading a bit further if that sounds good for you, Joey.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start though on the bottom of paragraph 2 on page 8 with the last sentence there. So if something new enters n number 2, it is determined as much by life process as by n number 0. This is really interesting. This is saying implicitly n number 0 has some determination power to it. We're not defining what the determination power is, but if something new enters n number 2, it's determined as much by life process, by n number 2, as by n number 0. Interesting.
Yeah, that comes with something for me too.
But is n number 0 spatially distinct from what is already n? Or may it be right here in what is participating? Obviously, we must choose the second if we choose at all, because the space relation is as yet undefined. And then that leaves a
Mm-hmm.
But then what comes right after kind of feels like it's going on in that as if to answer it. In these definitions, process is first. We don't assume the body and the environment and then put them together. Later, we will develop terms to speak of the body. Right now, it is BN number 2. That feels like a very rich paragraph to me. We don't assume the body and the environment and then put them together. We're not starting with two separate things. We're starting with a process. We're starting with, as he said on the previous page, interactional concepts. Mm-hmm. So we're starting with things already in interaction, rather than and then teasing apart distinctions from that interaction, rather than starting with things as if they were separate. And right now, from the concepts that we're playing around with, we don't have a space relation in the normal sense of space. Mm-hmm. We haven't yet defined the spectator's version of space. Anything at the top for you right now?
Yeah, I think I'm leaving pretty open question regarding the spatially distinct. I don't quite even track the second question in that paragraph, or may it be right here in what is participating? What is already in? Like most of these are kind of just maybe blank spaces for me, black boxes. Obviously, we must choose the second if we choose it all, because the space relation is as yet undefined.
Because if it was spatially distinct, we'd have to have some sense of how could it be spatially distinct. Mm-hmm. So this is interesting. Yeah, I just want to, there's this like weird thing going on here where Genlin is choosing to talk about space right now. He didn't have to. He didn't have to talk about space in n number 0, but he does. And now he's saying that, so he asked the question, is it spatially distinct from what is already n? Or may it be right here in what is participating? So he asked that question and then says, well, from what we have right now, we got to choose the second because, I kind of decided not to define the spatial relation yet. I will, but I haven't. So then n number 0 is in what's already participating. but is not yet participating. And there's this sense, I want to say, of both like, oh, that's really interesting, and it's also really unsatisfactory. What does that mean? I want to say a Gendlin, like a thing that Gendlin does, like a kind of Gendlinism, is it's really chill for Gendlin for something to kind of make a little sense and very little sense. It's like really chill. Like it's almost like saying, like, if we were to talk about space right now, we would be limited to saying that n number 0 is in what's participating. And I want to say, for me, that makes, like, I don't know almost anything about what anything of that means, but that leaves it an open question that can be further developed. Gendlin is very comfortable with things kind of feeling uncomfortable and taking time to develop it later on, and maybe redefining it, reimagining it, changing it, breathing new things. Maybe we'll have a spatial distinction later, and then we can say, actually, now n number. But until then, it's okay to be stuck. I just want to say that because, by God, if you read this book and you don't feel stuck all the time, I don't want to say something is wrong with you, but I just expect that you're going to feel stuck all the time. So let's be charitably stuck. Would you like to finish us off, Joey?
Yeah. With later terms, we will be able to say what part of n number 3 is the body. Body structure is always involved in some processes, or else it disintegrates. It is a structure from process, for further process, and only so. Body in n number 2 and number 3 imply each other because each is part of one organization that includes the other. Each functions as it does only in this wider functioning organization. This use of imply stems from the fact that the whole event is already referred to, when we think only of the body or only of the n. I just feel like that really ties to the paragraph previous to that you had read. We don't assume the body and the environment and then put them together. Later we will develop terms to speak of the body. Right now it is BN number 2 onwards about, how will these terms relate? Body and number 2, number 3. It's something about this wider functioning organization.
Yeah.
Where the whole is implied by all of them.
Yeah, so n number 0, pretty vague what it is. It's just almost like a placeholder for, like, us being able to talk about what can't be talked about, what is beyond, what is beyond, in a way, existence, but could come into existence.
Yeah, the not yet functioning.
And then we're closing off with body structure is always involved in some processes, or else it disintegrates. It is a structure from process for further processes, and only so. Now this feels so important about, like, how there's always going to be life when we're talking about the body. There's always going to be some living. There's always going to be some process. There's always going to be some interaction. There's always going to be some participation. It's not this, not this separate, dead, static thing. And so there's this inherent aliveness into the type of body that we're going to be discussing. So we've just finished chapter 1, and how was this for you, Joey? Like, what's in this for you, if anything? Like, what's alive, what's not alive, what's tired, what's not tired?
I am excited to have clarifications of n number 2 and n number 3. Vague recalls of my first reading of this book is that just that refreshing understanding of those will definitely assist moving through the rest. I have curiosity around how n number 0 will move into the rest of the book. there's some excitement at this conversation of space, which I think for me, if I relate to it freshly, is like, how do I relate to my like immediate environment in all the ways that he's invited us to think into it, feel into it as, and like seeing that as something of like a practice for me to sit with.
I want to say on the point of the 4 kinds of environment that there's this way where they're very clearly, and I mean this in a very open way, clearly serving Genlin's interests here, Genlin's agenda. Like, we could imagine many types of ways potentially now of like, there could be so many definitions of what an environment is, and Genlin is picking 2 very blurry ones with N number 2 and N number 3 as seemingly like kind of the heart and blood of this model, you know, ending chapter 1 by referring to a body, and N number 2 and number 3 imply each other because each is a part of one organization that includes the other. Notice the lack of reference to environment number 1 there. It's you know, I've mentioned this before to you, Joey, that it's as if N number 1 is there almost in the way similar, now I realize, to N number 0 is there to kind of like section out things, section out a couple things so that we can know, in a way, we can define what we're not going to talk about. So like N number 1 is like probably what most of us think about environment by default in terms of, is like, oh, there's monkeys that live in trees. I'm looking at the paragraph right now. Like others on the ground, and like, oh, there's a pollution cloud coming into the environment because the factory over there is polluting. And it's not that there's not a lot to talk about with environment number 1. It's actually more that there's already been a lot that has been talked about, philosophically speaking, with what this environment number 1 is for Genlin. So once we get by the end of it, it's like, you know, it's actually kind of N number 2 and N number 3 that we're going to be moving in between a lot. In part because we can't say that much about N number 0. We're almost mentioning it just to say that, you know, I mean, what's his line here? We don't want to say it plain isn't. It is. Let's say a little bit about it. Okay, we can't say much about it. Okay. And so just to say that almost when there's 4 kinds of environment, there's almost this feeling in me of like, oh, here's our 4 categories of things. And 4 is a great number because like that's when you draw like those axes, you know, like the axes and the top left quadrant, top right, bottom left, and they're all important. There's the 4 elements in Avatar the Airbender, which is a great show that I'm watching right for the first time right now and I'm really loving. And they're all meaningful and important. And I just want to say, from my felt sense of these things, that ain't so here. That ain't so here. It's not that N number 1 and N number 0 couldn't be deep, deep explorations of interest. But I can say with some, you know, comfort that what we're going to be really spending our time with here, what Genlin is going to find the most fascinating, is N number 2 and N number 3. And these are already really funny definitions of environments because we were even, I mean, part of your usefulness of reading this, Joey, as I was hearing it, was like, oh, I have some more distinctions. I have some more sense of like how these things are different, how they relate. That one, you know, part of like that N number 2 is what goes on in N number 3, and N number 3 is what participates, or sometimes can participate in N number 2. That N number 3 is wider than N number 2. But all this from this fundamental blurriness, like all of this of like, wait, is it? He even asks like, wait, the last paragraph of page number 6. But if N number 3 affects the body only if it is again N number 2. Is the distinction only for a spectator? Is this a meaningful distinction? I almost want to say, like, there's just something when I was first reading this about like how vague and almost imprecise these things felt. Like, okay, we have these 4 environments set up, but by the end of it, I'm just like in this wash of like, okay, so there's like this living process and this habitat, and then there's things like a spectator sees, and I'm just like, that's your four different types of like, okay, something that lives, something that's made by what lives, uh, N number 1, which is what I normally think anything is in anyways, and then N number 0, which is this unborn thing. So anyways, I guess I'm saying all this just from my historic, just to speak to that historical way I felt about it, maybe to speak to some of you who may feel like this is very vague. This, what does this mean? What is the point? And to say that's okay if there's maybe not much of a of a sense of how these distinctions could be useful here right now. Anything else for you about this before we kind of close this, session out?
I don't think so. I think I'm feeling complete with that chapter.
Yeah, so we spent our recordings at about 2.5 hours. So we spent some good chunk of time kind of going deep in this, maybe modeling some ways I've learned to interact with concepts and philosophy that I've practiced since kind of iterating through this book multiple times. I really hope that for people listening, it's very helpful. I would really, really love to hear open questions that you have about this. Feel free to send them in through our form. And I also want to say that, the richness of anything here is going to be generated, like elaborated by reading more. And, there's a part of me that almost feels a little bit bad about spending so much time on what, you could almost say is so little, because there's so much more that will be introduced as we read this book that will have so much interesting, so much of interest to talk about. And so just to say, from my point of view, that part of this exercise is kind of getting familiar with how to interact with new concepts, with the way that Jen Lin defines words, with the way that things kind of are going to often in this book actually be left unanswered in many ways and open and have this kind of felt sense of confusion that Jen Lin is really okay with. And that's such a different thing about learning that I think can really trip us up. And I'm curious if you have anything you want to say about like that felt sense of like, I don't know what's being talked about. I don't know as I'm going on what is going on here. For you, Joey.
Yeah, I think I maybe approach most reading with this mindset of, as I'm potentially being introduced to new concepts, a new system, a new philosophy, that they may be wanting to adjust my understanding of like basic terms, and already seeing that very clear showing up here with just environment and body. I think when I see somebody wanting to step into such basic terms and offer different understandings, definitions of them, that this really does point towards like, trying to kind of like build a new system from the ground up. And potentially, really this invitation to, potentially feeling disoriented in these specific terms. That very disorientation kind of sets the stage to feel oriented in a very new and different system once it starts to come together, be put together.
I like that point deeply. There's a kind of useful disorientation to the repositioning of basic terms.
For me, maybe it very much so relates to making contact with a felt sense and focusing, where there is that vague blurriness to start, and just to kind of sit down and let that linger, and kind of allow it to organize as I pick up aspects of it.
So I'm excited for us to continue soon. We may even do it today with each other. We'll talk about it. But the next chapter is chapter 2, called Functional Cycle, or FUCY, F-U-C-Y. And in that, I kind of like the idea of giving an anticipatory for the next stage. So I'm just looking at the pages right now and skimming it. That chapter is going to start repositioning more about process. So we touched into process here with environment number 2, living process, body N2 process. And in number 2, Jenlin's going to start touching into like things that we actually relate to in life, like eating, digestion, defecation, kind of actual real processes that living organisms do. From that process, we're going to start diving a bit more into the word imply and implying and implies, and this other term that Jenlin's going to bring in called occurring and implying, something that is going to have its own momentum to it, its own kind of forward movement to it, and those terms are going to become utterly central in the rest of the book. So we're really getting, Joey was mentioning the basic terms here. So implying and occurring might not, be pre-existing basic terms for a lot of us, but they are going to become basic terms for the model. And we're really getting with these first 3 chapters, like the absolute ground of things that we're going to elaborate so much more. This is the kind of healthy disorientation. This is the redefinition of old words, introduction of new words that don't mean much to us. And by the end of the book, I think Jenlin hopes, I hope that these words kind of give this whole different world of experience, this whole different world and way of thinking about how we live and how life works. And as some of you already know, one of the things this is in service to, and this is part of what makes it so rich, is that these are the terms that we're going to be using to understand. And I've cursed a couple times, but I still feel like prefacing by I'll be crude. What the fuck is going on when we're focusing? Because the existing model of scientific thinking, I feel like, has things that we could say about it, but there's so much about the feeling of focusing. And I almost want to say that part of what this book wants to do is take this feeling of focusing and describe and define with new concepts, new words, new ways of thinking about old words, what the fuck that feeling is. What's happening with that feeling? What is this feeling of focusing? What is this felt sense? What's going on with this? What's happening? How does it work? Why does focusing work? Why does focusing help us? Why does this pause make a difference? Why? Like, what wild questions to be asking if you've focused much? I mean, you probably have your own fantastic concepts and conceptions and felt sense of like what's going on here. And if you'd like to deeply elaborate that with this philosophically rigorous system that kind of builds itself to explaining what this stuff is, that this will be a fun journey. And this is exactly what this project offers, and it offers even more than that. But let's just start and stop there for this session. Thank you very much, Joey. This was super fun to record with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. Very orienting here at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, until next time, take care.